So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. In a minute, I'm going to hand you over to John Wells, who's head of design at Morgan Motor Company, to introduce himself. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or you think of anything you'd like to ask John, if you can WhatsApp Bradley, just to message him directly, then he will let me know those questions in a bit. Over to you, John.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me on your call this morning. My name is Jonathan Wells. I've worked with Morgan since just before its centenary in 2009. So I've been here most of my working career. Prior to that, a little bit of time at Land Rover, a bit of time at TVR, but predominantly just studying vehicle design, which I did in the north of England in Huddersfield, an automotive design course there for 4 years. So yeah, like I said, been at Morgan for over 10 years now. When I first joined, I was the second trained automotive designer, my predecessor before me being the first. He'd only been there a year or so before I joined. And with his arrival and then subsequently mine, we introduced modern design techniques to Morgan Motor Company. So whilst we're in our sort of 112th year, or quite an old company, as many of you know, modern design technique are relatively kind of new to Morgan. So as we arrived and they realized what Photoshop was and the power of visualizations, we ended up taking over the websites and all the visual communications too. So Morgan's creative team today looks after not just the vehicle design, but also the promotion of the brand, which is something I'd like to talk a bit about today as well. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview of me. I guess we'll get into it.
Brilliant, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of Morgan Motor Company and how it's evolved to present day?
Sure. So as many of you know, famous British company Morgan, founded originally in 1909. So it was founded by a chap called Henry Morgan, who began Morgan Motor Company with a three-wheeled vehicle, a cycle car. And essentially, he worked as a mechanic at the foot of the Malvern Hills, where we're based here at the factory. We're sort of right at the base of the Malvern Hills. It's a lovely view of the hills. And he lived just over the other side of the hills, but worked at the bottom. And he wanted to create himself a vehicle to take him on his commute to and from work. He did so on a very limited budget. And as a result, he ended up with a very rudimentary, very simple vehicle, but with a very powerful engine to get him over the hills. So by nature, it was kind of the affordable, high power to weight cycle car. And he started producing more of these, very soon moved into the buildings that the factory still is located in today on Pickersleigh Road, and began producing three-wheelers. So up until 1936, Morgan Motor Company only built three-wheelers. Many different guises were adopted, four-seated three-wheelers and various different streamlined versions for racing. And towards the sort of late 20s, early 30s, the racing three-wheelers were doing so well in competition that they were often required to start in the pit lane a lap behind some of the four-wheeled vehicles they were competing against, just because they were so lightweight and arguably more akin to a motorcycle. And that pedigree on the racetrack soon began to reach the attentions of the affluent, particularly in Paris, and there was a lot of attention towards the Morgan brand. And in 1936, the first four-wheel Morgan was built. This was really geniusly named the 4-4 because it had four wheels and four cylinders. And that is today still the longest running production vehicle in the world. So the 4-4 took on lots of different variants throughout the years, many famous cars like the Morgan Plus 8s, and they sort of continued to evolve, but always remained fairly true to their beginnings. It was a very simple chassis platform, fairly low tech in the sort of the chassis dynamics, but to be honest, you know, even the more recent traditional Morgans, until the steel ladder frame was discontinued, were sliding pillar and a live axle leaf spring suspension, but they only weighed 800 kilograms. Paired with a Mustang 3.7 litre V6 or even a 2 litre Ford engine, they were pretty potent, just like go-karts really. So yeah, they continued to evolve throughout the years, and then in 2018 we announced our new the end of the V8 Morgans, and that paved the way for the latest generation of Morgan car, which we call the CX car. And this took the learning of the aluminium platformed of Morgan vehicles, and now all of our four-wheel cars are built upon an aluminium platform with a BMW engine. For a period in time, starting in 2000, we produced a much more elaborate shaped Morgan that didn't have the sort of iconic classic body, and that was named the Aero. That was founded in 2000. Behind me, the orange car was the latest rendition of an Aero, and a bit further behind that, we have the very first Aero, and that was the car that kind of repositioned the Morgan marque a little bit. Aluminium chassis, aluminium bodywork, BMW engines. And that was kind of our performance end. That technology now has filtered down into all of the core products we do. So that's a very brief 100-year history. But,
that's fantastic. What is it that makes Morgan unique in the 21st century?
So I think the way we build cars today kind of still honours very much the tradition of how we've always built the cars here. We are a niche volume manufacturer. We don't rely on huge production runs and heavy tooling investment, and our ability to do that is born from the fact we still rely heavily upon the craftsmanship of coach building cars. So we call what we do 21st century coach building, and essentially what that means is that the body structures of Morgan are independent structurally to the chassis and running gear. So we put a lot of energy into developing platforms that get us through the various legislation. They house various different powertrains. They do a lot of the crash and structural work. And then the body design is completely independent. So there's a wooden frame that we use on top of the chassis, which is non-structural. There's been a few myths and rumors throughout the years that Morgan has a wooden chassis. That is not now the case and never has been the case. It just wouldn't work. So we have a wooden frame, which is hand worked on top of on top of the platform. And that wooden frame gives us a few benefits. One, it means that we can be very flexible in manufacture. So we can cater build volumes to cope with demand by changing the shape of the wooden frame, which in itself is the former for the hand-beaten aluminium panels to be worked on top of. So once the wooden frame is sculpted and dropped onto the platform, the chaps then will hand work and hand beat aluminium panels on top of that wooden frame directly. We will also pair that with superform panels. You hear a lot of modern manufacturers talking about their use of superform. It's something we've done since the early millennium. Essentially, the superform panel work lends itself much better to low vehicle manufacture because they're aluminium tools, but it essentially takes a large sheet of aluminium and sucks it via a vacuum into, or blows it either way, into a large female tool. And as a result, unlike pressing, you get a very even surface thickness over a large area. Whereas pressing, you have to accommodate for the deepest part of the press. And so you can end up with much thicker material where you don't need it. Superform gives you a very even surface thickness and hugely elaborate forms. Because the tools are aluminium they used to make it, they don't lend themselves well to mass manufacture. But for aviation and Morgan scale companies, it's ideal. So the entire front wing on a Morgan, for example, is all one sheet of aluminium. So that's an example of some of the modern technology we use alongside the traditional craftsmanship. But once that aluminium work, be it superformed or hand worked, is laid on top of the wooden frame, the same wooden frame is then used to carry the interior upholstery and trim. So we will staple to and attach the interior finishings directly to that wooden frame as well. So it's kind of fundamental in what we do. It also means there's zero waste. We don't have plastic parts and trim panels, and it's very kind of lean manufacture and very sustainable. It gives us great flexibility, but it's also incredibly personal because when you come to the factory to see your car in build, or even just as a visitor to see these cars being built, you're able to have a very personal dialogue with a craftsman that is creating your car for you, which is a tremendous value to us. And also it's incredibly lightweight. So as I mentioned, the steel ladder frame chassis cars, despite having a steel underpinning, would weigh in at 800 kilograms upwards. The latest generation inline six BMW engine, B58 engined +6 car, absolute rocket ship, pushing 370 brake horsepower, 1,000 kilogram in weight. And all the modern technology there, but 1,000 kilograms, incredibly exciting to drive and very honest. The wood is a bit of a sort of, it's humorous to a lot of people, but when you understand how it's used and what it's used for, it soon makes a lot of sense. We use ash wood, which is a very stable wood. So it grows very evenly. You don't get knots or irregularity, but also once it's been felled and kiln dried, it maintains its shape. So it doesn't move over time. But one of the big benefits of using ash wood is its ability to calm down NVH, so noise, vibration, and harshness. The wood kind of works as a natural organic damper for any of those vibrations and noise. So whilst many people are running around squirting expanding foam in and putting in scrim and sound deadening and adding weight to the car to get rid of inherent noise and vibration, the wood does that very naturally for us. So driving a Morgan always feels like a very solid, nice place to be. And actually it's incredibly good in crash test too. It kind of absorbs a lot of energy. Although not so good on the fascias of airbag doors, which is one we've discovered in the test recently. But other than that, it's very good in crash too. So
that is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I didn't know half of that at all about Morgan, so that's really great to hear. Can you tell us what is your role? What is the role of the head of design at Morgan Motor Company?
Yeah, so I mean that's another kind of the sort of question we get asked a lot with a bit of tongue in cheek. You know, what on earth does a designer at Morgan do? They all kind of look the same, don't they? And you know, at a glance, you think of a Morgan, you do think of the iconic running board and that Coke bottle silhouette and the long bonnet and the louvers, and you know that is the traditional British sports car. I think we've kind of claimed that niche and that kind of that icon. You know, it's the evolution of the XK120s and 140s with Jaguar. We kept that sort of early deco kind of inspirations, and that's what you think of. But when you actually dig a little bit deeper, just in my tenure over the last decade, when I started, we reinvented the classic Morgan a little bit, a few subtle facelifts, a few details, and every detail on a car, be it a gear knob or a dial face, involves sketching and modeling and computer modeling and prototyping, and all of those are design processes. So we facelift the classic Morgans, and we continually do that, continual upgrade on the traditional shape Morgans. But just in my tenure, when I started, we put the Aeromax into production, which was a very elaborate long-tail coupe, which was a sort of real step forward on the aero platform vehicle. That took us into the sort of £100,000 segment, 4.8 litre V8, incredible vehicle, both visually and performance-wise. Thereafter, we did the Aero Supersport, a Targa version, the coupe, which was a fixed head. We developed a few concept vehicles. So Morgan actually developed a hydrogen fuel cell concept car in 2009, 2010, which worked and ran. Never been afraid of things like that. We then did the three-wheeler, which was a car sat behind me just here. This was a V-twin motorcycle powered car, which gave us a sort of global product because it went into the States and all over the world. And that again was a full body design. We did a concept vehicle called the Eva GT, which was a full coupe. Aero 8 Series 5, which was a return to the convertible. That's the car just behind the three-wheeler behind me there now. A couple of other concept cars chucked in the mix there as well. I'm trying to remember everything we've done. EV3, which is a big one. That was a project that I was really fond of. That was the electrified version of the three-wheeler, which was an amazing car. We had 6 prototypes running around there, full electric. So yeah, when you consider that when I first started, there was 6 of us in design and engineering, 4 CAD engineers and 2 designers. We now have 30, but you know, many of you will know that's a tiny amount of people for an R&D team when we have 3 core different platforms and we're looking at EV technology, full platform and body design. So we're really thinly spread, if you like, but it keeps us agile. So yeah, lots of vehicle programs, lots of development, lots of technology, R&D in things like electrification and body and panel design and aerodynamics and CAE. We have a sort of specialist in every part of the car process here, albeit very few of them. We have a chap that does the homologation and legislation. We have electrical engineers. We have EV specialists. We have automotive designers like myself, CAD engineers that work on the CAD systems to develop everything in a digital environment. Every car is 100% digital to begin life. We have simulation experts. And essentially every part of the process is contained in this office just here. And it actually runs down the office. So I'm sat at the far end and we'll do the initial sort of strategy, conception, design sketches. We do some clay modeling. We'll digitize and scan those models and make prototypes. What's nice about Morgan is we can pop in and see the craftsman and say, is this possible? Can you do this? What are the constraints of the materials? Does wood bend like that? You know, can you achieve those forms? So we're working really closely with craft. So actually, unlike many people, when we do a concept car, it's not kind of exists in Photoshop, but isn't actually possible in real life. Everything we do is possible because we work closely with manufacturing right from the outset. Then the engineering team will take over and we'll develop this car into a production solution. And then we'll launch the car, which involves the other half of my team, which are the sort of the visual comms guys. So we create the photography, the video, the websites, the brand definition, how the car is communicated, working closely with the marketing teams too, of course. So as a result, we've kind of got this full circle kind of process here. And the chap creating the photos and telling the stories through the video sits right next to the guy designing the car, all in the same office. So there's an honesty to what we do here. And as I mentioned, you can come and see the factory and walk around. We have 35,000 people touring the factory every year. So it's a very sort of open book company, if you like. It's not so great when we're building concept cars on the line next to the tours walking around, but it's manageable.
Oh, well, hopefully that'll happen when we come as well.
Definitely, yeah, and you must do that. So yeah, I guess the role of a head of design here really is just to work really closely as part of a small, tight-knit team. You get involved with a great deal. You have to have a really good understanding of all parts of the process, just because, you know, we're such a small team and with such limited resource and time, you kind of have to be right first time. And you get a great awareness of everything, you know. I do miss the days at university when you could spend a week obsessing over a visual or a piece of concept art, the sort of things you see posted by some companies. For us, it's kind of, you know, get the designs done as efficiently and quickly as possible. But that kind of makes the cars what they are. You know, the compromises, the size of the team, the quirks, the details, the input of the craft right from the outset. Those sort of nuances that make the Morgan less than perfect, but that's what makes it perfect in some senses.
That's fantastic. It's a lovely job you've got there. My background is Aston Martin. I worked in the dealer network for 14 years, and I know that Invest Industrial invested in Morgan, didn't they, in 2019? Is that right?
Yes.
And
right.
has that changed? How has that changed things at Morgan for you?
It's been really good, to be honest with you. When I first started here, and like I say, design and engineering and modern technique was all quite new to Morgan. And at the time, the Morgan family were very embracing of this. They were nuts, to be honest with you. Charles Morgan used to be so excited about, you know, modern design technique. He'd sometimes just come into the studio and he'd watch the Transformers movie the night before, and he'd be jumping up and down like, boys, we must draw cars like this, and get into the films. And he'd spend a week drawing Transformers sometimes. I mean, they were balmy, but great enthusiasm for introducing design and technology. And I guess they had the sort of foresight to realize that we are a motor manufacturer and we do have to comply with legislation and safety. And I think they recognized that we needed to take on investment to ensure Morgan had a future. Airbag programs are, you know, £7 million investment, 7-figure investments. Crash programs, the technology and the R&D time and the investment in the future was important to ensure Morgan did have a future. And, you know, just sort of being self-funded, the Morgan family, I think, realized it was time to take some investment on. And Invest Industrial are brilliant. You know, they haven't sort of bulldozed in and changed everything. I can remember on my very first meeting with the head of Invest Industrial, he basically sat down and said, we want to help you take your ideas out of there and make them a reality. And that was very much their approach immediately. You know, Andrea Bonomi told me a wonderful story about how when he was younger, he used to love riding his motorcycles for a sense of complete freedom. And nowadays, he can't buy the bike he wants. Everything's got so much technology in it, and everything is so focused on the latest this and the latest that, and power levels that you're never going to realize. And what he misses is being able to find a machine that gives you that real analog, tactile opportunity to have a motoring experience that's kind of undiluted by all the noise and the technology and the jargon, something very honest. And he saw that in Morgan, and, you know, that's what we do. And so I think straight away, I was very reassured that Invest Industrial would help us achieve what we wanted to achieve. But of course, we do need to make investments. We did need to grow the R&D team. We did need to improve the factory. We did need to ensure that we had a solid future on all of our vehicles. So Invest Industrial have helped us fully realize the new CX platform, which was something that we were already developing pre the sale to Invest Industrial, but something that's helped us get that across the line. The CX platform paves the way for new powertrains, new body styles, and that's a big part of ensuring that we've got an exciting decade in front of us. They've helped create things like this. So before Invest Industrial, I worked in a shed. I signed an asbestos waiver. I used to get wet every winter as the roof leaked on my ceiling, and it was just a miserable place to be. We were all kind of crammed into this little box, and now we have a modern design studio. So it's and to be honest, put together by the guys at the factory still. We are kind of quite a humble company. We build our own show stands with the guys that build the wooden frames for the cars. Will come to Geneva and help us build the show stand. You know, we don't sort of spend liberally, but yeah, this building here was put together by the guys at the factory and some partners, and this gives us the space to actually develop things properly and secretively. So I can only show you what's behind me. In front of me, we've got full-size concept car models. We've got a big development workshop where we create all of our one-off chassis structures and new powertrain developments. We've got a couple of really exciting, soon-to-be-seen new models over there. A special project we announced last week, the GTRs. Those 9 cars are sort of lined up there, ready to be worked on. So yeah.
No, we all just want you to turn your camera around now.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. So, yeah. But yeah, that's so yeah, it's very exciting. It's been a huge step change, sort of coming to Morgan and introducing sort of Photoshop and digital modeling and showing them what a clay model was 10 years ago through to having facilities like this. It's kind of been exponentially growing Morgan's capability, and Invest Industrial have certainly helped accelerate that curve. But also in our communications too. They're not necessarily focused on selling thousands more cars. I don't think we'll create many more cars than we have done in the past. In our centenary year, we built 1,300 cars. I can't imagine us getting to that point again for a long time. It's more about creating a bigger reach, looking after our existing customers better, focusing a lot on understanding who those customers are, a lot of investment in CRM and data, and understanding, you know, how we can better serve our existing customers as well as reach a new audience and new customers, and educate them as to what Morgan's all about. Try and dispel a few of those stereotypes about Morgan and show us what the company we are. So I think that's a big part of the investment too.
So I worked in sales with Aston, and I was just curious as to what the process is for customers that are buying Morgans.
Well, to be honest, it's a fairly personal one. I think we have a large dealership network. So 70% of the cars we produce are exported to Europe. We have cars into America, into sort of Asia, and all over the world essentially, and a lot of cars into the UK too. So whether you're doing it directly at the factory or whether you're with one of our dealerships, one of our network partners, the process is largely similar. You've understood the brand, you get to see the cars, you test drive, but then it's about the specification and the personalization, which is arguably something we don't shout about loud enough. But you don't just sort of pick a range of 1 of 12 colors for your car at Morgan. You pick any color in the world you can imagine. You could bring in a coffee tin and say, match the color of this. So it's any color in the world for the exterior. On the interior, I couldn't tell you how many different upholsteries and trims we offer. And if we didn't have the color you wanted, we'd have something especially tanned for you at our tannery. So it's literally anything you can imagine: stitch work, detail, embroidery, hoods, wheel options, powertrains. It's kind of endless in terms of the configurable options, which can be quite overwhelming as well, we recognize. So we do offer, you know, fixed specs and suggestions to guide people on their way. But it's essentially a bit of like an atelier-based service almost. You'll sit and you'll touch your materials, you'll pick your fabrics, you'll understand your paint codes, and any one of our dealers can guide you through that process, or here at the factory. So we have the sales facility here at the factory to do the same thing. It's like I say, it's a fairly open book factory. The one thing I miss from working down here, which is only 1 minute down the road from the main factory, is just, you know, the chance encounters you have with customers seeing their cars on the line. You'd walk past and, you know, Marcus or somebody else in the team would say, "Oh, here's John. He works in the colouring in department," and he'll give you an idea or two, and you'll have a chat with the customers and you'll chat specs with them. So it wouldn't be unheard of for any customer to have a direct line of conversation with an engineer or a designer here about their spec too. So there's no kind of hierarchy. Our design team aren't in an ivory tower somewhere. We're all kind of very hands-on here at Morgan.
John, we keep some of the customers away now. We keep some of the engineers away. It works quite well.
Yeah, I mean, there's 1 or 2 guys that aren't so good front of house. Yeah, that's fair to say. but no, that's the benefit of having the design and engineering team mixed together as well. All the engineers at Morgan wear skinny jeans, and you can see the influence from the design team washing off on the engineering team too. But yeah, so that's the process really. You'll pick any one of your specs and details, and then your car will go into build. If you are from further afield and you can't visit the factory, we do beautiful photo books, which are, you know, leather bound, beautiful books that document your car's birth all the way through its build. You know, we build so few cars by comparison to other people, and every single spec is so different that we don't kind of every Morgan is individual. You know, there's not like a limited edition run ever needed, because every single car is completely unique. There's no two the same. So yeah, you'd have a photo library documented and created for you to talk through that process, or you'd come and visit your car. So you'd come to the factory, you would meet the guy working your metalwork, you'd meet the guy working on your wooden frame. Quite often, our clients will ask these chaps to sign their car. I mean, they're the heroes; they're the ones that have built it by hand. And you'll see it being born. You may then come and collect it yourself and drive it away from here. So it's a very, very personal process. And even when we do shows and events, we don't use big external marketing agencies and trained guys to sort of talk the talk. We will use the guys that work at the factory at the shows and events. We think that's really important to keep everybody close to the sort of front face. And you know, quite often you'll be on a stand on Geneva and you'll walk to a Morgan representative and ask about, you know, PCPs and financial details, and they'll say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you, but I can tell you how I personally hand finish that panel and what techniques I use to do that." And you know, it's very personal interacting with Morgan. I think that's the word I'd use.
That's lovely. It sounds like a fantastic place to work from that perspective. I know my colleague John has got some questions on electrification, so I'll let him ask those.
Yeah, hello there. I'm John of SCC. Thanks so much so far, John. It's absolutely fantastic what you've done, and I think you definitely win best background looking at what you've got there. As Rachel said, I've got some electric questions for you, actually. In the past, I've not had the cleanest of vehicles, and now I'm talking emissions over body panels here. But even I've started to look down the electric route, and I just want to know, possibly expanding on what you said earlier about having some electric prototypes and putting some R&D into electrification. Will Morgan actually go electric, full electric? And maybe just give us a little bit more information on the experience you have with electric cars and the skill sets in your company for that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, hopefully I painted a bit of a picture that Morgan, you know, we don't shy away from embracing any new technology. We use the latest generation BMW engines in all the cars we do. We work very closely with something cool coming past. We work very closely with BMW on R&D and development. We know for the last 20 years we've had a great relationship with those guys. So that they definitely help us sort of explore what the future has to offer to some degree. But like I say, we did our first sort of non-ICE engine in 2009 with the Life car, which was a hydrogen fuel cell. We then did the EV3 vehicle, which was a full electric vehicle. I mean, that car, we had 6 running prototypes, and they were just mega. You know, they were the same performance as a current 3-wheeler. They do 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds, which if any of you've driven a 3-wheeler is plenty. 100 mile an hour. They were incredibly noisy. They sounded like something out of Star Wars. There was no sort of insulation or deadening. It was just this screaming electric motor, which just sounded bonkers. It sounded like a pod racer. That's what we used to call it. It just used to whir and whine, and it was quick as you like, all that torque, no gear changes. It was kind of, you would chicken out before the car did. And it was just a mega thing. And it kind of, the EV3, when we announced it, kind of really turned a few heads. A lot of people kind of went, crikey, electric cars can be actually fun and engaging and a real driver's car without becoming sort of super hyper cars loaded with technology. This is a kind of very distilled, handmade, pure sports car. And that kind of reassured us that we're not scared of EV at all. We want to embrace it. We want to get it within our vehicles. You could definitely have a Morgan that's an analog and honest motoring experience with an EV car. The challenge we have is just our size. We're not big enough for the economies of scales to make the technology and deploy the technology at a level that's that's not going to drive the price of our cars just exponentially through the roof. We're not going to be able to develop our own technology. We have to rely on what is coming through from the bigger OEMs or from suppliers to the niche market and the niche world. And at our quantities, it's just not there at a cost-effective place in the immediate future. But as I mentioned, we have EV teams employed here. We do recognize that it is the future, and it's certainly a big part of what we do. I'd certainly expect to see over the next few years the occasional naturally aspirated engine or big V8 being announced alongside it. We don't think ICE vehicles are completely behind us yet, for sure. But we're excited to broaden our portfolio to include EV, within the future. It's definitely a big part of what we do and a big part of our R&D activity today. But no announcements for the immediate future that I can let on to just yet.
Oh, not giving anything away. Well, at least the EV specialist you said you have there is got some job security then, by the sounds of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's fair to say, yeah.
Fantastic. And maybe just another question, following on one, you may have touched on it, but what do you think an electric future looks like for Morgan, and also just other sports cars in general?
Yeah, I think like I say, I think a lot of people, when there was the first talk of doing an electric car for Morgan, especially we actually tried a few. We did a four-wheeled Morgan originally, and this was pre-CX generation. I think when this would have been now 2014 maybe. It was codenamed the Plus E. We had a Plus 8, a Plus 4, and a Plus 6. So it was a Plus E, and we built one car. And to get it to have a comparable performance to a Plus 8 at the time, we put so much weight into the vehicle, in the batteries and the motors. The car ended up weighing near 1,900 kilograms, and its donor vehicle would have been 1,100 at the time. And it was great. It drove, it moved, but it was heavy. It lost its kind of identity as a lightweight British sports car. And I think it's important for us and for any brand, I guess, to not lose sight of what their sort of core USPs are when adopting this new technology. That project then sort of stopped as a result of that. We learned a great deal about electrification, but that kind of made us look towards the three-wheeler platform, whereby we had a V-twin powered front end, but the cars weighed 500 kilograms. They were much smaller. It needed smaller batteries. They weren't used to such great distances, and so we looked towards electrifying our entry-level platform instead. But there was a lot of sort of reluctance, even within the Morgan sort of ranks to, can you really take away this big noisy V-twin on the front of the three-wheeler? You can probably see one behind me. There's a gigantic 2-litre V-twin engine. This thing is like a Spitfire. Its exhausts terminate either side of your eardrums, and it's a really mechanical, petrol-driven spectacle. And sort of take that away and put an electric motor in, there was a lot of resistance. But as I said, once we did it and people drove it and engaged with it and realized that you can still keep all of those brand USPs that people love about Morgan apparent with a different powertrain, everyone just realized that there's plenty of room for electrification in a car that is not designed to go to the supermarket or to commute to work, but is designed to have a fun motoring experience. And yes, I think the conscious side of that is important to a lot of people, but it wasn't the main driver for us, really. It was just recognizing that it's coming and seeing what we could do, but without getting too sort of carried away by the whole thing. Morgan's cars are very sustainable anyway. A Plus 8, for example, a V8 engined Morgan, it's a modern BMW engine, or at least it was. We've discontinued the V8 now, but the V8 modern BMW engine, relatively clean, but not carrying around a 2.5 ton X6. It's carrying around a lightweight sports car, so it's not working very hard. Morgan cars are typically kept on the road for incredibly long times, so they don't go back to ground. I think they say 90% of all Morgans ever built since 1909 are still accounted for somewhere, which I don't think anyone else could say. So that in itself, these cars aren't getting recycled and churned back into ground. We don't have huge pressing stamps and conveyor belts and manufacturing facilities all over the world. Everything's built here in Malvern. Our footprint is tiny. Our wood comes from the UK, our aluminium is processed and bought in bulk through the UK. Everything is local, and it's low energy manufacture. The way we build our cars is powered purely by Weetabix. So actually, when you look at the whole picture of the footprint, I think you could probably drive a V8 Morgan with a cleaner conscience than you could driving a Prius. But unfortunately, that's just not how it's measured in terms of finances and taxes and policy. So so we have to consider it, but we're going to do so with a firm eye on making sure it's still a Morgan car. I think that's the key takeaway for that one.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And John, thanks so much for asking those questions. It's really insightful to hear a bit about the electrification. I think we've got some questions from members now. I've got a question from Gareth Blake. Can unmute himself?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Gareth.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. I just wanted to ask, I mean, you've already mentioned quite a lot about the electrification, but I was quite interested in whether the relationship with BMW was going to extend to their sort of hybrid vehicles, you know, their hybrid drivetrains, and what the challenges were around including that into the design of the vehicle.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, BMW quite a good echo there. You might need to mute yourself again.
Okay, now carry on.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, yeah, BMW have been a close technical partner for this for a long time, but that's not to say that we take their technology and put a new skin around it. So what we have to do is work to translate some of the signals and some of the powertrain ECUs on the ICE engines. We have to work to translate those into a Morgan platform. So BMW help us with the powertrain and help us do that piece of work, but it is very much a Morgan system that drives the car. We don't have the same level of sensors or technology or even internal functionality that a BMW has. So we still build our own systems around there. So whilst BMW can help us, we are reliant on developing a great deal ourselves. A BMW battery, for example, wouldn't fit in a Morgan. So we have to pair parts of the equipment that's available to us with existing equipment that's available elsewhere and join all those dots and bring it all together. So so yes, whilst BMW are a close friend and partner, they can't sort of directly give us a turnkey solution. It fundamentally wouldn't fit, and we're not about to sort of just rebadge an i8 as a Morgan. You know, it's not what we do. So so yeah, they definitely can help us and offer support, and we do have a lot of suppliers and partners from various decent sized OEMs and tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers that can support us on that journey that we would look to support for. But they certainly don't offer us a turnkey solution. I mean, the biggest thing is it's not just the actual making an electric motor turn via a battery and do so safely. It's the whole dealer network for Morgan. You know, every one of our dealerships needs to become trained in working with EV technology. Our factory floor here, you can't, you know, we'll walk around the Morgan factory. It's a bit of a health and safety nightmare anyway. And to have, you know, silent, undetectable EV around the place, you know, you've got to make sure you can build these cars safely, that they can be driven safely, that they're not going to have unprecedented, unplanned acceleration all of a sudden. It's actually all the safety case that goes behind the electrification that's a bigger job than actually making the wheels turn. So it's that whole piece, and the EV3, although that didn't make it into production, the electric three-wheeler, because our supplier for the batteries at the time went into administration and weren't able to support us get it across the line. We did learn a great deal about how to deploy EV technology into our supply network and in towards our customers. It even gets to the point, you know, how do you ensure that the car's being charged correctly? You know, if somebody left it in Sweden on the driveway for a year without charging it and the battery depleted, you know, you need to be able to account for warranty claims and things. There's so many dimensions to making EV technology work that yeah, BMW can certainly help us with a lot of that, but they don't have the turnkey solution for us.
That's great, thank you. And Gareth, thanks so much for asking the question. We've got another question from James Stewart. You'd like to unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, John. Thanks for this morning. It's been really insightful. Just wanted to ask on a sort of another future angle with regards to cars. There seems to be a bit of a sort of diversion at the minute where some manufacturers are talking about resto mods as their sort of future business models. And the EV route, as you've sort of touched on, I just wanted to know what your angle at Morgan is. Obviously, with a company like yours, I think resto mod's quite an interesting area that could be explored. Is there any plans in-house for that?
Definitely, I think that's a brilliant question, and that's one that we talk about a lot. You know, the sort of future definition of the Morgan mark and where we're going and what other people are doing. Morgan kind of taking the sort of the traditional form and shape and some of those joys of classic motoring, but in a vehicle that is sort of modified to be reliable and offer the performance comparable to a modern day car. we've kind of been doing rest of mods for as long as you want. You know, we're taking traditional craftsmanship and coach building, detailing within an iconic shape, and you know, we're making it relevant to the modern day. And what I find fascinating at Morgan is that our aesthetic design is kind of rooted in that mid to early century design language, which I think a lot of our clients over the last sort of 20 or 30 years in particular take a lot of nostalgic confidence in cars that look like that because maybe their grandfathers owned one, or their dads even, or maybe friends of their dads and neighbors. For them, it's a car that's been around since their childhood. There's a lot of nostalgic security in a Morgan. You know, it's friendly and approachable when you know the car before you know the car, if that makes sense. So what's really interesting for me is we don't want to take that product and that appeal and transform it into 2030 and do a McLaren or an Aston Martin competitor. You know, we're not going to compete, and we're not going to suddenly build a really super modern car. We'd lose that kind of value. But for me, it's interesting to think that, okay, what is the driver of today that now is getting a bit younger for us? What does the 50 and 40 and 30-year-olds of today, what do they associate with? And that's perhaps now a little bit more mid-century. So, you know, how does a 1940s, 50s design language evolve into a 1960s, 1970s design language? And all of a sudden, then you're drawing legitimate classic cars that, you know, are like E-types and early 911s. And there's a beautiful era of automotive design there that Morgan can create legitimately. We did build a few, many sort of coupes and vehicles without the running boards in the 50s and 60s that are really sort of relevant cars to look at for us. At the time, they were neither modern nor classic and didn't do particularly well for Morgan. But now, if we were to do a car like that and sort of evolve the brand forward, but not in a jump of 60 years, in a jump of sort of 20 years, I think we can continue to legitimately build these resto mods almost, although I'm not sure I love that word for Morgan, but you know, that kind of the appeal of that traditional car with those modern underpinnings, and do so without it becoming a pastiche. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to evolve the four-wheel products in a really legitimate way that still continues to do what we do, as well as looking at things like electrification within our portfolio, as well as looking at what the successor to the Aero might be one day, because the Aero is no longer in production. And of course, as the video at the start of the call demonstrated, the current three-wheeler is now out of production. So, you know, what does the next evolution, the next generation of this car look like? We've made, you know, no secret of the fact the three-wheeler will return. It was the big strap line on the end of the video. And whilst I can't give you a proof of life, I can tell you that I'm looking at it. So yeah, there's some awesomely exciting stuff coming from us on both the four-wheel front, on the sort of flagship level, on powertrain technology, but also on sort of core product like three-wheeler. There's some really cool stuff coming through at the moment that hopefully will be a bit of a surprise and won't follow any automotive trends too sort of obviously.
Maybe you could just turn the camera around really quickly.
Yeah, no.
Anyone.
Probably can't do that. Conscious we've got one marketing team and sales team on the call just
going. And we've got another question from another member. Anthony, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hi, John. Thanks for that very interesting and engaging presentation and talk there. There's actually two things came to mind. One of them was I just noticed you can actually hire a Morgan from Morgan Motor Company. So if we want to have a play, we can just rent one for the day, and it seems very, very reasonably priced as well. Is that right? That's right.
Yeah, that's right. It's I mean, it's a shame with everything that's been happening in the world, the pandemic, we've not been able to show it off, but we've got an amazing new visitor centre facility here. So I mean, if you pop online, you'll see on TripAdvisor reviews, we have an amazing experience on offer where you can, for relatively tiny amount of money, I think it's 20 quid or so, you can come and tour the factory at Morgan. You can watch a lovely introductory video. All of our tour guides are Morgan owners. They'll take you around, tell you about their personal experiences. You'll get up close to seeing all the cars being built, and then you come back to the visitor centre. There's a cafe and a shop and all that sort of stuff. You can bring your own cars, and there's often a car park full of great stuff here as well. So every day of the week and some Saturdays as well, it's just a great place to come and visit. And now we have this new visitor centre. We used to operate out of an old working man's club, and now we've got this beautiful new building It's a stunning piece of architecture, actually. It's won a couple of awards. It's a really, really beautiful building.
I look forward to us being able to come down there one day and experience that.
And that's right. Very soon you'll be able to come there. And on Saturdays we're opening up too, so you'll be able to come and have a factory tour, get that full experience, and then, like you say, we hire cars too. So we have a fleet of vehicles that you can you jump in, take for an afternoon, for a day, I think, for a weekend, or for a whole week. I mean, Marcus will be able to tell you a bit more detail about how that all works, but it's on the website as well. So yeah, come along and just experience the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of sort of trend at the moment, these automotive destinations, places like Cafe and Machine, and all these cool spots that are popping up for people to come and have a community experience. But again, it's something Morgan perhaps just don't sing about enough. But we've got a venue here. You can just come anytime as a car enthusiast and see some great stuff and get up and close to it and meet like-minded people and grab a bacon sandwich or a full English breakfast and a cup of coffee. And yeah, it's a great place to come and visit, actually. So yeah, definitely encourage you to check that out on the website and stuff.
Brilliant. I look forward.
I'm not in sales or marketing. I'm not plugging it, but you know, it's worth checking out. It's really good. I'm here today with my son. Actually, we'll go and grab a coffee in a minute, and he loves coming here too. So.
You should be in sales for that, John. That was a great pitch for the experience centre.
Yeah.
But as I think Brad and Rachel will mention at some point, we can do more for this group of people, for SCC, than just, by all means, just rock up to the visitor centre, experience centre as a normal customer. But we were looking to put something on special for you guys, because we'd like to see our car park up at Morgan full of your cars, and I think it would just be a fun thing to do. So watch this space. I think I'm sure Brad, I'm jumping the gun, but I'm sure Brad will talk to you all about that later.
It's getting close, isn't it? It's getting close.
Well, sorry to hold the time, but my question, I only just noticed that. My question really was going back to sort of EVs. And one of the things that larger brands are investing in is synthetic fuels. Do you see that as just supporting older cars that aren't being made, or do you see that as having potential to preserve some aspects of the character of the ICE Morgans in the future?
Yeah, I think it's certainly relevant to us, and it is something we talked about a little bit here at Morgan. We operate in a sort of bit of a weird world where these aren't sort of one-offs and SVA type vehicles where, you know, we can build single vehicle approved cars. We have to comply to sort of European small series production, which isn't quite full-blown M1 category testing, but it's in that middling ground where you do have to take everything very seriously, from your emissions through to your external radiuses and cars, and all of the compliance that we have to go through. Does mean we have to sort of follow suit a little bit on some of that technology, and doing an engine program or any change to a sort of fuel system or something for us is quite significant, and we have to make sure it's completely globally relevant, and we can do that in all markets. So we've definitely got an ear to the ground on it, but I think we've certainly got many years ahead of us of coexistence with ICE engines alongside EVs personally, especially when our cars are particularly very green. We use a lot of modern powertrains within them. So yeah, it's definitely something we've got an ear to the ground on, but not something I can say a great deal more about at the moment.
Well, go on. And we've got another question from another member. Pietro, are you? Can you unmute yourself, please, and go ahead?
Yes, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Morning.
Yes. Good morning. Hi. Just, I'm always interested in industry's dynamics. I would like to ask you. Morgan has obviously an incredibly specific DNA in the market. Do you see any direct competitors these days, or would you be able to mention somebody that would be in your customer's head when thinking about Morgan as well? Yeah,
that's a really good question, and one we get asked a lot actually, who your direct competitors are. Perhaps it's that we've not invested tons in market research up until this point, so I can't give a definitive answer, but I suspect that the fact we've got such a broad demographic of customers makes it quite hard to answer that question. We have, chaps in their sort of early 30s, having families and children, that don't want to lose a ton of money on a Cayman or a Z4 or something lower price, and you can get into a Morgan for sort of £40,000, and you don't lose money on it. The residuals are brilliant. So, and it's completely bespoke and personal. So for a lot of younger people, it's a really appealing car opposed to many other sort of small 2-seat cars at that sort of price bracket. On the other end of the spectrum, you know, a fully equipped +6, you can touch 6 figures on, and you're into some serious metal there. But again, the residuals are great. These are real driver's cars. They're not loaded with infotainment. There's no sat navs. There's no audio system. So, you know, there's no sort of direct competitor. It's a very experiential sort of investment. We have a lot of couples that will buy a car jointly. You know, they both get involved in the specification. For them, it's a decision about, you know, either having the Morgan or extending their property, or the boat, or the experience, or the holiday. And you know, it's I think it's a sort of an investment in experience as much as anything. So in terms of direct automotive competitors, it depends exactly how you look at it. You could look at it financially, you could look at it in terms of performance, or you could look at it in terms of aesthetics or appearance. And it's very hard to say that, you know, we squarely pitch ourselves against these particular people. It all depends on how you compare it. You know, a Morgan won't go round the corner as well as a 911, no doubt about it. You'll probably have a great deal more fun trying in a Morgan to get around that same corner. You know, we don't have sort of traction control and DSC and launch control programs in our car. It's a case of bury your foot and try and keep it pointing in the right direction. It's very much an analog experience, which, you know, in a £90,000 car, I don't think there's an equivalent to that. So yeah, it's a hard one to say, really. I think we compete against other exciting experiences and investments in the world. And, you know, we have a lot of motorcycle customers that get into a 3-wheeler because they've got every bit of the joy of the motorcycle. They're very analog and exposed and open and lightweight, and they've got that motorcycle engine on the front, but they can share it with their partner a bit better, or they're a bit safer, or they're, you know, perhaps they're older motorcycle customers that can no longer get their leg over, so to speak. And all sorts of different walks of life, different demographics, different ages. It's very hard to say who Morgan's competitors are. I think we're fairly unique.
Thank you for that. And Pietro, thank you for asking that question as well. That was a great question. We've got another team member. Pierce, would you like to ask? I know you've got a question you wanted to ask.
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so basically, I just wanted to ask a simple question. Obviously, you mentioned the 3-wheeler for now is not being produced, or it's not being, you know, returned. I was just wondering, what are the current models in the lineup that people can actually get their hands on?
Yeah, great. So cars currently for sale at the moment are the CX generation vehicles. So we have the aluminium platform CX generation platform, which has either a B48 engine, which is the 4-cylinder BMW engine, or a B58, which is the inline 6. The B58 is available as an automatic. The B48 is a manual or an automatic. Just recently, we have announced a very short run limited edition GTR, which is a bit of a continuation project, although again, I hate that cliche, but it's a bit of a continuation project where we were very fortunate that we were able to purchase back some rolling chassis platforms that we had sold to another company some years ago. And as that company went into liquidation, the administrators put those platforms up for sale, and we were able to buy them back, which is really great for us. It means we've been able to do another V8. So there's a GTR available at the moment, but they're incredibly exclusive and incredibly limited. And then we have the CX 4 cylinders and 6-cylinder cars with the more traditional shape. The last of the 3-wheelers are just coming off the line now. I'm not sure if there's any of those available in the network ananywhere. I'm sure there are. We do have used cars. Marcus is shaking his head, so no new 3-wheelers, but there are a sort of plethora of used vehicles out there. But yeah, other than the sort of CX generation cars and the GTR, we're kind of between significant model announcements at the moment.
John, yeah, the only other one I'd throw in is the factory recommissions. You talked about how iconic the aero products are.
Yeah.
And while we haven't got that in the range, we're seeing more and more customers and new to brand people coming back to us and wanting a factory recommission. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. You know, Morgan handwork and hand build these cars, and you know, we did a vehicle range called the Aero 8 GT to celebrate the end of the Aero bloodline, and these cars had sort of additional louvers and diffusers and splitters and canards and things on the front of them. And there's one behind me, actually. if you wanted to bring your aero back to the factory, perhaps an aero you purchased and have it reconditioned, even to look a bit like a GT, it'd never be a GT, but you can have all the bits and pieces hand worked and stamped into your bonnets, and we can work on cars, using the same craftsmen and down the same production line. So, in theory, any Morgan that was out there, you can bring to us to turn into a dream Morgan, if you like, as well.
Wow, that's great that you can do that. How fantastic. Cannot wait to get to your factory and see it.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Piers, thanks so much for that. And I'm going to hand you over to Brad. Everyone knows Brad. He's our founder, and he's got some questions of his own, I think.
Yeah, hopefully. John, no, thank you so much for that. That was amazing. I never ever thought Morgan were doing what they're doing, and a real eye-opener. I'm probably going to try and rent another one from you, because that sounds really cool as well. So maybe get an SCC fleet going for a day out, which would be really, really awesome. I didn't realize quite that you carry that sort of traditional technique and mindset and things. Some of the stuff you touched on still was kind of, I thought, they look traditional cars, but I didn't think that necessarily you were still using those methods. So again, I that was pretty cool, and pretty cool to still have that in the world of automotive. The other one that you said was you made 1,300 cars in 1 year. That must have been pretty flat out. 24 hours a day work.
Yeah, just short of 1,300 during our centenary year. That was, to be honest, it was too much for us. It was actually heaving. At the moment we'll build anything between sort of 600 and 900 cars typically a year.
Oh, amazing. That's pretty cool. If I get rid of,
I'll jump in on that one again, Brad. The really, my background, I've come from other car companies. The cool thing about, for me, with Morgan is the factory is so nimble at shutting volume down. If it hasn't got customers for the cars, it does not push them into the market. So it is able to operate and reshape itself to make 600 cars. And we did that last year with COVID going on. 600 was fine. We were able to keep going, but we didn't push. We didn't need to keep going. The business plan was for a higher number, but we didn't, because we didn't want to flood the market, flood our network. And just like I was shaking my head saying that there's no three-wheelers out there, I mean it. We're, in terms of how lean we were able to keep the pipeline, it's because the factory is so nimble. It all stems from there, but that gives our customers this immense residual value. It's no lie. The Morgan used car values are just unreal. So it all stems back from the way that we make them.
No, great. And so everyone wants to know who to talk to. Actually, Marcus, who we've just been talking there, is the CSO of Morgan. So I've known Marcus for a long time with our time with Aston Martin. So is Rachel. Marcus also joined another British brand, Lotus, which I know there's quite a few Lotus owners on the call. And now he's very, very senior within the Morgan brand. And I was going to touch on this at the end, but we've been chatting, Marcus, to create an individual experience for the members, over and above what you would get normally for coming to the factory. So they're really the team are really keen to, and hopefully we'll get to meet John when we arrive as well. It'd be cool to meet you in person. Now, touching back on your point about the camera, John, if I actually remove Marcus from this call and the other people on the call, can we have a look now behind you?
So we get a little bit of a roam in the other direction, maybe.
Yeah, cool. Can we have a look around? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, a little bit. So this is the one half of the got the design offices in here. So this is where we'll draw and sketch and render. There's a couple of engineers there that are behind on their work, so they've come in to do a bit of work this morning. And then here, actually, this is our design atrium, where usually would have more of our full-size models and sculptures and bits and pieces, but at the moment we're just using the opportunity where there's no tours going through to uplift our museum. So this is some of our heritage fleet. So we've got some of the last steel ladder frame Morgans here. We've got a late three-wheeler there. We've got an Aero GT sat over here. All the additional louvers and bits and pieces, and that's a pretty special machine. Under here, and I hate to think what sort of condition it's in, but under here, this is the hydrogen fuel cell life car concept, which is pretty. I'll probably pull that off. That was a pretty dramatic concept vehicle there. The very elaborate interior. Not sure if I can show that particularly well, with sort of bent wood flowing through the interior.
Very cool.
Which is pretty cool. The car under here was the very first ever aero. So this was the Geneva show car back in 2000, which is a pretty special car.
Yeah, really nice.
They got last of the Series 5 aeros here, the silver car. Race cars at the back. This is a lovely car. This was built for Charles Morgan's mother. Sort of suicide doors, and actually, when you look at the quality of the door closures and things, a brilliantly crafted car. Famous V8 vehicles is MMC11. A lot of pedigree as a racing V8, and then this was the last of the V8 to sort of celebrate the end of the V8 era for Morgan. A rather tasteless motorcycle in the corner, blue and white flames on it. Has nothing to do with us.
It's Marcus's, yeah.
That's Marcus's. And then we've got a four-seater, which we no longer build, but so that's over there.
Oh, interesting.
And then a very quick flyby of the design end of the office. My 4-year-old sat in the corner, and Dad looking after him. And then kitchen at the end.
You mentioned. I'm not sure if you told us, but you said there's a GTR coming. Is that not able for us to see just yet?
Not today. No, I'm afraid we can't look at that one. Just in our reception area, we've got a lineup of three-wheelers, which are very topical, considering what we're working on quite heavily down here at the moment. This is MDEC, we call it, Morgan's Design and Engineering Centre. Martin came up with a name, but yeah. So at the moment we've got three-wheelers in the reception, which is kind of very, very topical, which is probably all I could say really. A couple of beautiful traditional three-wheelers. This is a super sport three-wheeler. This is the car that inspired the last generation outgoing three-wheeler in terms of its aesthetic. And next to it, this is an EV3. So this is one of the electric running prototypes that we hammer around in, which is absolutely mega. Obviously, without the big engine on the front, we had to think a little bit about what we do with the face and the aesthetic. We wanted to give it quite a friendly face. Every Morgan, when you see it, there's no sort of aggression or pretentiousness about the character of a Morgan. Yeah. They're a very sort of friendly vehicle. The EV3 had a monocle, which we always quite liked on the start. You have the option for a second headlight, but we quite like the asymmetric design of having the monocle.
It looks like a helmet. It looks like looking at a helmet, which is really cool.
That's right, yeah. You got the low slung sort of headlamp running lights at the bottom, which sort of push the whole thing down. But in terms of mechanical function, and one day you'll see what the next generation of three-wheeler look like, but we're looking at mechanical function on the front end of the vehicle and being very honest about the car's functionality, much like we talked about with the wooden frame being an integral part of how the car's built. In the EV3, this big machined piece of brass acted as the cooling conductors for the batteries. So the air would pass over this slab of brass and actually help keep the motors and batteries cool as it drove. So very functional front end. And this is filthy inside. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't be showing you really. But you can see this car is used, it's full of helmets and does get hammered around a little bit. You can see we had a Bakelite knob just to select your, I'm not sure how well I'm showing that. We had a Bakelite knob just to select between reverse, neutral and drive. And then you'd hit all your toggle switches, analog dial on the one side. On this side, you had a fisheye lens, like something you see out of a 50s sci-fi movie, which sort of projects all your EV running details and bits and pieces. So yeah, bit of a contrast to.
I really like it. I want to go one of those.
Very cool.
Really, really cool. Yeah, really, really cool. Yeah. Didn't expect that. So no, thanks for showing us. Just a quick fire questions for you then. I'll hit you with 3 questions in one go, then you can answer. So favorite Morgan past and present, favorite other cars, and then favorite non-automotive designs and designers and automotive designers. I'll let you choose a favorite automotive designer, being a designer yourself as well.
Crikey, that's virtually impossible questions. Favorite Morgan, I guess when I first started working at Morgan, my first drive was in a Morgan 4.4, and that still today is probably one of the cars I love the most. I love the three-wheelers, I love the aeros, I love every Morgan offers something so different. You know, if you're hammering across Europe, then there's nothing like being in a big aero. If you're having a nice evening out around a city centre or doing a weekend away, you know, any of the traditional Morgans are great. But the 4.4 Morgan for me was the steel ladder frame chassis Morgan with, you know, it weighed 790 kilograms, a little 1.6 engine. It was a Ford engine, but it was designed by Yamaha in it, and it just revved forever. It had, you know, zero technology, but it was like a go-kart. You'd get in it, you'd drive your foot right in it, and just brilliant fun to drive around. And that 4.4 has something that every Morgan has. It was just very analog, very fun, unintimidating, and greatly enjoyable. So I think, you know, the 4.4 Morgan is kind of the iconic. It's the darling of the Morgan kind of eras, and yeah, it's just the purest Morgan. So my favourite Morgan would probably be a 4.4 1.6. Okay. Although that being said, I love them all. So favourite other car? That's not a possible question. I don't think we can even answer that. It could be anything. It could be anything. So we take a lot of inspirations from, you know, traditional cars and classic cars in particular eras. We're looking at a lot of mid-century design stuff at the moment. So, you know, a lot of very obvious 250 short wheelbases and things like that are obviously great and enjoyable. But, you know, there's a lot of mid-century stuff that we're looking at the moment, which is really kind of capturing our imaginations and fascinating us. So, yeah, hard to say really favourite other car. I mean, my daily at the moment is a Land Rover. I love Land Rovers. I've always loved Land Rover brand. Everything from working on sort of classic series Land Rovers right through to the more modern discoveries and things. I think, you know, I do like the Land Rover brand in general, and a lot of sort of early 2000s vehicles. My partner's got a little 2004 A2, which is a great little car, and I think TTs and even 6 Series and everything from the sort of early 2000s is starting to look really cool again at the moment. And motorbikes as well. I do like motorbikes too. So yeah, hard to say really. Like all sorts of stuff. And designers, that's a tricky one really. We had a great time recently at Salon Privé. I was very fortunate and humbled to be asked to be a judge at one of the concours events at Salon Privé last year, and we did there was a Churchill Cup judging competition where a few world-leading designers were invited to come and judge cars, and they invited me to come along as well for some reason. And that was really cool, getting to know some of those guys and some of their thoughts behind what they were trying to do with their individual brands. Yeah, I mean, Julian Thompson at Jaguar has always been a fascinating chap to speak to. Russell Carr from Lotus as well. It was great to get to know him a little bit better. Spent quite a bit of time chatting with Marek Reitman nowadays from Aston Martin. They're obviously sort of former Invest Industrial too, so it's interesting to see what they're doing and how they're pushing things forward. But you know, we do feel like the underdog compared to some of those other designers. We're you know, we're doing things quite differently than they do. But yeah, there are all sorts of designers and inspirations everywhere. Very hard questions. Sorry.
No, it was just interesting to get your view on it. I've had a couple of messages text to me, so I'll ask them out. Someone's asked me, when's the new model coming and what's the price point? So could you give us any insight to that?
I presume that's in regards to a three-wheeler, and I'm afraid I probably can't tell you anything.
Okay, no timescale at all.
I'm so sorry.
No problems. And
what are you saying, Marcus? What's the official line on that one? I'm looking to you here.
Well, so GTR, we've not yet confirmed the final price. We've given an indicative. It's a run of 9 cars, and we've told our dealer network that it's in the region of £250,000. That's sort of the nature of a car that there's only ever going to be 9 of. Name another bespoke, naturally aspirated V8 engine car production run of less than 10, you know, from a brand you've ever heard of, and you're looking at a huge price ticket.
Yeah,
in
sure.
Morgan terms, that's going to be coming out. We're talking about that more publicly soon. Three-wheeler, new ones not on sale this year, but we can't afford to be out of the market too long, and you can read between the lines.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, the three-wheeler's a fun toy. It can't be a ridiculous price because it's an and car. It's the car you buy once you've got your daily and your other car and your this and your that. And the three-wheeler for a lot of people is just a bit of outrageous fun that goes in the garage and gets used on the sunniest, nicest days of the year. So it can't be ludicrous money. You know, the current price point feels about right.
Yeah.
And then we've got the CX cars that absolutely are, that represent good value for where they are in the market. They're 65 to 90,000 pounds.
Okay. Another quick one for John. I've just been sent. Was about your time at TVR. If you don't mind answering those. Were you there during the Peter Wheeler or Nikolai Somersky era?
Nikolai Somersky, but very, very, very briefly. So, that was my first exposure to niche vehicle manufacture. TVR actually came to the university I was studying at the time, and there was a bit of a live competition, if you like, the opportunity to look at some stuff in the luggage solutions for the Tuscan 2, and we did a bit of a study on that. My study was sort of, the one they like the look of. So we spent a bit of time at the factory, sort of turning that into a reality. But it was, very, very light, short-term contract stuff. But fascinating. You'd walk around the facility. It was a Blackpool at the time, and it was just piles of sort of Sagaruses and Tuscan bodies that weren't quite right. The way they used to build the car with the fiberglass to just project entire bodies, and just see these graveyards of these cars piled up. And as a young automotive designer, it's just a mega place to be. And yeah, a small team, really passionate about what they do. A guy called Graham Brown, there was one of the design team there that I was doing a lot of work with, and just a really passionate bloke that was super excited to have that responsibility for the brand. And then shortly after that, a couple of live projects with Land Rover, and it was like the opposite end of the spectrum. But I kind of knew pretty early on that I wanted to work in the small niche design. I guess I just wanted to have as much ownership as possible when you get that more in a small company than you do in a big one. I like to be involved in every part of the process, so that was really interesting. But on the first visit that TVR paid to the university, when they sort of introduced us all to the project, and we did a lap of it was a Sagaris. We did a lap of the Huddersfield Ring Road in Sagaris, and that was the closest I'd been to an exotic car at the time, it did, stirred the soul, if you like, the engine noise and the look of the thing. It was in a dreadful, like, flick green and purple paint job. So, but yeah, no, it was still incredibly exciting, and that kind of cemented it all for me, really. So yeah, TVR compounded my interest in British sports cars and niche manufacture, and very special.
If you were to continue doing what obviously the tradition of Morgan with the cars you're producing, do you ever have a vision, or would you ever be allowed to push the boundaries and come away from the traditional lines of Morgan and go for more of a modern looking sports car, or is that an absolute categorical no from your powers?
No, not at all. There's no sort of amazing hierarchy and people sat in closed offices here, and we don't have focus group upon focus group to guide the design. It's the wishes of not just me. It's a team. I've been here the longest in terms of design creatives, but there's a team of really talented automotive designers, really talented engineers, and between us, sat in this room here, we suggest what we think the future should be, and both with Invest Industrial and with the previous Morgan family, they're very receptive to hear what we want to do, and they get behind us and do it. And I think that's really special. That's what I love about Morgan. So whilst we do focus groups and things, and we do, show designs to select committees, just for sort of validation, they're very behind supporting us what we want to do. And to be honest, like I say, cars like the EV3, they kind of broke the mold. The three-wheeler broke the mold before that. Yeah. The Aeromax, when we first did that car, no one saw that come in, a sort of £100,000 extravagant coupe that looked like it did.
Yeah.
The Ever GT concept car, the life car. Morgan has this ability to just surprise people with things you just never saw coming. When we pulled the sheets off the three-wheeler, this was kind of when electrification was first gathering some traction, and here Morgan were with a 2-litre motorcycle-powered fighter plane. And people just don't see it coming. And that's what we like. We've got the GTR. No one would have thought we were about to announce a short-run V8 naturally aspirated engine right now. this year actually represents a year of a few special projects coming to fruition. There's one we've got that's going to be showing its head within a year, I could probably say, that is no one's going to see coming.
Okay, really.
And then thereafter that, what we're looking at in terms of design language, as I mentioned, if we were to walk forward design language from the 40s to the 60s, what that would look like, that's quite a step change in terms of automatic evolution. So yeah, watch this space for some pretty game-changing stuff, I'd say.
So yeah, so I'm guessing you have to tread this tightrope of technology versus design versus traditional, and I'm guessing it's, you know, from the outsider's perspective, not realizing how difficult that actually is with everything that, you know.
There's a huge melting pot of Morgan of ingredients. You've got all the history, all the heritage, you've got the craftsmanship, you've got the aesthetics. The face of the car is the same on all of them. You know, a classic Morgan or a three-wheeler, you have the horseshoe grille and you have the friendly headlights. You know, proportionally, they've all got a long rear overhang and a short front overhang. And there's certain rules and criteria like there is with any bike. But there's a huge variation, you know, between an aero and a classic and a three-wheeler. There's a lot to build upon. Materials, the craftsmanship, the history. I think you can take any one of those handfuls of ingredients in different measures and still have a Morgan.
Yeah,
we've got much more design flexibility than I think you'd originally realised.
Cool. Okay. Just before I round up, if anybody listening in that wants to unmute themselves, sadly my view doesn't enable me to see a show of hands. But does anybody have any questions that's watching this now for John that you've thought of that we've missed, or you would like to know, or Marcus, in fact? Just shout your name out if you have. If not, I'll come in.
I have a last one, if I may.
Pietro, is that?
Yes, Pietro here.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's been really, really interesting and so insightful and enjoyable as well. Congratulations for what you do and the way you have to explain it as well. Really enticing. My question is, I'm a watchman. I'm into mechanical watches, so I'm also in this anachronistic world of the analog versus the digital, if you like. Yeah. For some of the watch brands, like, I don't know, Rolex and Patek Philippe, the waiting lists are crazy at the moment. That are the game that everybody has to face. For Morgan at the moment, what are the waiting lists generally? What is the waiting time requested from the time of an order to the time of the delivery? And I'm sorry if this has been already mentioned.
No, it hasn't. It's another really interesting one. The three things you kind of hear all the time at Morgan. Does it have a wooden chassis? No, it never has done. What on earth does a designer do at Morgan? Quite a lot, actually, I'll have you know. And also, has it still got an 11-year waiting list? Once upon a time, people would put their kids' birth certificates down as, you know, as a sort of to secure their spot. And historically, being built entirely by hand and the huge demand, the low volumes, Morgan has been associated with having a very long waiting list. That's not a bad myth or rumor to have, but unless it's a brand new model, nowadays it's much shorter than that. On a model that's well established and has got past this initial boom, you could be in a Morgan, you know, within 6 months or less, and that would be completely built to your specification, down to the finest detail. And you know, you'd wait longer than that for a car from most companies. So it's much less than you think, but it does depend on the model. It depends on, you know, how long it's been established in the marketplace, the level of specification to some degree. You know, if you wanted ostrich hide on the inside of your car from a certain type of breed of ostrich or something, you know, it might take a bit longer, but ultimately, you know, it could be as little as 3 months up to 12 months, anything in between, all depending on the model, but not a significant waiting list. Very interesting synergies with the watch market, like you say, entirely analog, entirely made by hand, and we try to think about that. You know, the whole conversation about Morgan merchandise and product partnerships is a much bigger one, but when we are thinking about our partners, we're not trying to stick a badge on a brand that we've got nothing in common with, just for the reach. When we develop any product, we try to co-design and develop things together that have the same qualities. So a watch, for example, would be an analog or mechanical watch.
Thanks, Pietro. Where would you see a Morgan? Would you see them every single country in the world? Are there countries you haven't put cars into?
Yeah, virtually every country in the world, yeah. I mean, yeah, there might be some countries we haven't, but as to my knowledge, China, America, Europe, wherever you can imagine. But you know, 800 cars a year, seeing one, it's pretty low chance of seeing one. Even for myself, you know, if I see a Morgan on the motorway, let alone one I've designed, if I see an aero coming back up the other side of the motorway, it's like seeing a butterfly. It's just like a unicorn, you know, it's like, crikey, there's one. They do exist. You know, and they're very rare, but they're everywhere, every country.
And is there a country that's gone a bit bananas for them outside the UK? Would you say that's the strongest market outside of the UK?
A lot of pent-up demand in America. We, like I say, 70% goes to Europe. Germany, France have always been strong markets for us. But again, with so few dealer representations, it's often just a measure of how good the dealership is there rather than where the pent-up demand for the brand is. But again, you're asking questions much more geared towards my colleague Marcus here than me. But you know,
John, I'd only throw Japan in the mix. That we've always been strong. That Anglophile customer.
Yeah.
And increasingly, some of the new Asia markets, Hong Kong's and Singapore's, just seem to be getting us a lot more than they ever did.
Cool. Yeah. Last, before I round off, then anybody else want to shout their name out and have a last minute question for John?
Yeah, James, if possible.
Cool. Yeah, James.
Hi, John. Me again. Just wanted to ask, really, I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, both boys, both car mad. They've started making murmurs that when they grow up, they want to be a car designer. What's the reality of kids who want to grow up being a car designer? Because it's one of those, I want to be a footballer type jobs, I think. What's the reality of how many of them get drawn into designing indicator stalks, and that's your job, and how many of them actually get to get that dream job where they're penning cars as they imagine when they're a teenager?
That's mega. I've got a 4-year-old, not quite talking about his career path just yet. He wants to be a lava scientist this week, but yeah, no, I've got a 4-year-old that loves it as well. We came in today in a +6, and he's actually sat at my desk at the moment drawing cars. You know, he gets excited too. It's tricky, really. I guess there's a very few dedicated automotive design faculties. When I studied, there was Northumbria, Huddersfield, and Coventry. Coventry was then and still is the kind of the halo faculty for car design in the UK. There's a few around Europe as well, Forzyme and a few other well-known sort of faculties for vehicle design. And once you've done your degree, you know, a few guys will go to the Royal College of Art. I very nearly went to the Royal College of Art. I was offered a place there, but then I was also offered a place at Morgan, and the appeal of earning some money was slightly greater than it was continuing studying. So I ended up going to Morgan. But it's not straightforward. I mean, there's very few car companies, and the studios aren't massive. So no, a lot of people don't end up in automotive design in a sort of senior position. I would say it's fair to say in my group, probably out of 30 chaps that I graduated with, maybe 4 of those are actually even in the car design industry. But that being said, what you learn through industrial design in general, and particularly car design, is an appreciation of so many different relevant skills. Whether it's using Photoshop to communicate ideas, and that touches any of the creative arts, whether it's media or product design or photography or anything, video or whatever it is, you learn things like understanding ergonomics, the way people engage with products, and that touches engineering, packaging space and the technical side of it. You have to understand material properties, you have to understand technical constraints, you have to understand electronics, you have to understand all these things to be able to design. And then the process of ideation, getting inspirations, brainstorming, sketch work, being able to communicate by hand through drawing is a really powerful tool. CAD modeling, you can use that in so many industries, whether it's architecture through to product design. And if you're designing a toothbrush or you're designing a sports car, it's exactly the same process. Sketching, prototyping, clay modeling, visualization, CAD modeling, presentation skills, being able to sell your dreams. You can work on something for a year and have a 10-minute opportunity to pitch that to a board, and you've got to get it right in that period of time. And you learn a lot about that sort of thing too. So whilst it might be hard to get into a job in car design, I think what the study of any industrial design gives you is really powerful. And I don't think, whilst you set your sights on car design, I think if you ended up doing anything related, you become, you're more than happy with that. So I definitely encourage pursuing it, although it's not straightforward getting into a job. But meet people early on. Like I say, I did a lot of stuff throughout university. I've tried to get as many live projects and live placements and short contracts, and I tried to do as much as I could early on, get to know people. and ironically, I've ended up staying in the same job for over 10 years because I love it here. But I think that's the key, really. Portfolio, collect your sketches, and have something to show someone.
Cool, thanks, John. Anybody else want to ask a quick question before we round up? Cool. All right. Well, John, a huge thank you to you and your team for allowing us access to your knowledge, the Morgan Motor Company today. As I said earlier, we're definitely going to get on with Marcus and the rest of the team to organise getting down there as soon as we can. We did have 60 people booked to come to you back in October. We had to cancel at the very last minute. So everyone's very, very eager to get there. So really looking forward to that. Our next event will be this time next month with McLaren again. They're going to give us a little bit more insight into their factory. Anyone else, John, Marcus, you're more than welcome to tune in if you want to see inside there. But more detail will be on the member portal, and we're working with McLaren how to do that. But a huge thank you to Rachel, John. Everyone's asked questions. Really looking forward to seeing you face to face, and looking forward to getting on meets, drives in our cars. So I'm going to finish this for now. Drop me a message, WhatsApp, any other questions. There's any questions that you think of after the video you want to ask Morgan, I'll reach out to John or Marcus directly, and we'll get that found out for you.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks everyone for taking the time.
It's been great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. See you all soon.